What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more classical music, and we're returning after just about a year to finally finish the Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns. This, as I think I mentioned way back when I started this, and I was doing it little bit by little bit. I'm going to finish all the rest of the movements in this same reaction, so we'll get through it quickly. But as I think I mentioned back then, it was originally composed in 1866, but Camille Saint-Saëns was trying to be a serious composer, and he felt that the light simplicity, or as I think he put it in French, frivolity of the overall composition was something that he didn't want everyone in the world of music, and music critics especially, to hear. So he forbade any public performance of it. It was meant for like a private setting, and I think, played for friends and family. And it wasn't until the year after his death that it was finally publicly performed, and when that happened, it was well received, and it's become a staple of the classical music canon that is, performed worldwide and year after year. So it's one of those cases where, as someone who's written a lot of things earlier in my career that I wouldn't necessarily want people to read, because I feel like over time I became a much better writer, there is value to be found even when the artist themselves eventually distances themselves from the work. So in this case, again, it was something that didn't become a worldwide sensation until after Saint-Saëns had died. In any case, we're going to listen to essentially the second half of the overall suite. And as I may have mentioned when I reacted to some of the earlier movements many months back, there are two different ways this is performed. Often it's with a sort of chamber music type of arrangement, meaning just with a piano and multiple pianos and with a smaller set of string instruments. There are occasions where this is arranged for a full symphony orchestra with a full string section, although I think that's less common. In any case, the remaining movements that we will go through is characters with long ears, and I guess music critics have since determined that essentially this was Saint-Saëns referring to donkeys and the sort of intense opening where it's almost like this sharp back and forth sound they have compared to donkeys braying, if you know what that sounds like. The piece after that is the cuckoo, which is a type of bird in the depths of the woods. I'm very fond of that one. Followed by aviary, again we're talking birds. Then pianist, which refers to people playing pianos, so it seems to move away from the animal theme, at least for one of the movements. Then fossils, animals which are no more, but whose remains live on and can be studied and understood, followed by probably the most famous piece of the entire suite, which is to say the Swan, and then the finale, just listed as that, the finale. So I'll try to pause as we go through. A few of these are like less than a minute long, so I think we only have, 8 or 9 minutes of material here, but we're going to jump through pretty quickly the movements. And indeed, I think the first one, characters with long ears or donkeys, is like 45 seconds. So here we go. This is Camille Saint-Saëns, and once more, just to remind, this is conducted by Andre Previn and performed by the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. So here we go, Camille Saint-Saëns and the remainder of the Carnival of the Animals. So, very much like that hee-haw sound that you can hear donkeys make, like characteristically. And before we hear this lovely The Cuckoo in the Depths of the Woods, which you can already get a sense for that deep within a very immersive environment just in those opening chords. It's interesting to follow the aquarium, which has this mystical, fantastical, and maybe a bit dangerous type of sound, with something as sharp and minimalist as characters with long ears. So the order of the individual movements in this larger suite, I've always been intrigued by. And although fair to say, sonically, characters with long ears has never been my favorite part. I enjoy the stark contrast following on the heels of the aquarium and preceding the deeper and more sonorous The Cuckoo in the Woods. So again, The Cuckoo in the Woods, moving on to the next movement. So that movement, again, I like a lot. It starts more calmly than it finishes, and I think that woodwind, I'm not sure if it's an oboe, but it has that back and forth, weren't, weren't. I feel like that's maybe the cuckoo's cry, and the rest of it is maybe the ambience, the environmental setting of being deep within the woods. And again, at the beginning, it feels calmer, maybe not exactly, happy or beautiful. Well, beautiful in terms of the setting of it, although I do think it's a beautiful movement. But as it goes along, it feels like the tension and the intensity and at least the potential danger, the anxiety of the piece grows a bit, and those forte chords really drive home the maybe uncertainty or lack of understanding where you are. And again, if you were hearing a cuckoo's cry with that, maybe you could try to place that and follow that out to a more safe place, or a place where you feel you understand better. But I always like the way that piece progresses from calmer to more intense and seemingly uncomfortable. So the next part of it is aviary, which again is a sort of place where birds might be found or kept. The fluttering and capricious movement of the birds. And now, pianists. borrowing from Mozart, I believe. Forgot how long that part was. The Swan. Walking behind the string. So again, I think people can appreciate why that sounds a bit more serious than a lot of the other suite overall. Although again, I think the totality of the Carnival of the Animals is what gives it that zoological, many different things on display type of feel. But I do agree with, I think, a lot of music students and so on who've studied it, that this piece is perhaps the most sonorous, the most elegant of all the movements. And I do get the image of a beautiful swan floating gently on the water, perhaps landing and gracefully moving through a pond. But it's interesting because, again, the piano, it has this very step after step after step feel, whereas the slow and smooth movement is, I think, conveyed most clearly by the string work, the violin. And I should mention, this piece, or that movement in particular, gives a asterisk credit to Anne Martindale Williams, who plays the cello. So again, yeah, not the violin, the cello. So yeah, she was the soloist on that piece. So yeah, I also wanted to mention, because the transition between Pianist and Fossils was so quick, I sort of had to stop, because that opening with the xylophone of Fossils, it really is memorable, and I've heard it used in other places. And when I listened to this when I was younger, I remember that movement definitely standing out, although I don't think I knew exactly where all the movements were cut up. But yeah, it has a very, maybe not zany, but energetic and wild feel to it, and that call and response, ba-da-da-da-dun, ba-da-da-da-dun. I like the way it sort of goes back and forth and vacillates, if you will. So yeah, I don't know if that's the idea of, bones being played, or whether it's a characterization maybe of species long since it's extinct, but it's definitely a memorable part of the overall suite, despite the Swan immediately then capturing your attention and mesmerizing you with its elegance. So now the very last part of it, called the finale. Which may remind you of the opening. Triangle in there? It's all of them, right? A lot of the different animals and parts or pieces that we heard up until that point come back for the finale. So I like the synthesis of different motifs and themes that characterize the entire suite. So yeah, I do enjoy the finale. I feel like I've heard that used in a cartoon somewhere. I don't know if it was like a Disney cartoon, or maybe I have this image of dueling pianos like Daffy and Donald, which would obviously be Looney Tunes and Disney. So I don't know if I'm remembering that right, but wherever I've seen it, maybe Fantasia 2000, maybe the original Fantasia, perhaps that's it. But I've definitely seen that in some cartoon rendering, which, people will be aware, cartoons, the ones, the classic era that I grew up in the early 80s watching, even though a lot of them had been made in decades previous, use classical music because what's the correct term? Not statute of limitations, but they were all in the public domain, essentially. They were available to be used without having copyright issues. So, yeah, a lot of classical music I was introduced to through cartoons as a youth. So that's another one that I've seen and heard as part of some cartoon somewhere. In any case, shout out again to Andre Previn and the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, as well as the soloist Anne Martindale Williams with the cello. And then, again, Joseph Villa and Patricia Pratis Jennings were on the pianos. So, yeah, a cool overall performance. I know the completion of it took a great amount of time because I was doing them pretty regularly, and then I think I did some different classical reactions between now and then, including Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre, because I ended up reacting to a Duran tune, Dance Macabre, and it's like, well, I can't do that without going back and doing the famous work by Saint-Saëns. But yes, we're now finished with it. If you haven't seen the previous videos, go check those out. Do let me know what you think of the piece overall, and I will see you next time. Peace.